At my daughter's wedding, when her groom loudly called me a local homeless person and his parents laughed at my modest clothes, the guests froze in shock. I just smiled, grabbed the microphone, and uttered one sentence. Their faces instantly turned pale. They couldn't believe their ears. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My hand rested on the brass door handle of the harbor room for 3 seconds longer than necessary. I smoothed my blazer, the navy one I'd worn to retirement dinners and funerals, and stepped inside. Mitchell saw me before I saw him. I caught it in my peripheral vision, that microsecond assessment, eyes traveling from my collar to my shoes and back again. His expression didn't change, but something behind it did. I'd seen that look in courtrooms when defense attorneys realized they were working with weak evidence. Mr. Collins. He stood eventually, extending his hand with the enthusiasm of a man fulfilling a contractual obligation. His grip was brief, fingers barely engaging. Glad you could make it. Judy mentioned you prefer comfortable attire. My daughter rose quickly, kissing my cheek. Hi, Dad. You found it okay? I've lived in Charleston 62 years, sweetheart. I know where the restaurants are. We settled into our seats, Mitchell and Judy on one side, me across from them like a job interview. The position wasn't accidental. He wanted visual partnership with her, wanted me isolated. I'd arranged interrogation rooms the same way. So, Mitchell leaned back, one arm draped across the booth behind Judy. Judy tells me you recently retired. Last year, 30 years in the prosecutor's office. That must be quite an adjustment. He glanced at his phone, screen lighting his face. Different pace, I imagine. Different, yes, not slower. Judy touched Mitchell's arm, her fingers light on his sleeve. Mitchell just closed a massive investment deal. Tell Dad about it, honey. Well, he said, and his posture shifted, shoulders back, chin up. This was his territory. Financial consulting is where real impact happens. We just restructured a portfolio worth $8 million. Numbers don't lie, unlike people in courtrooms. I let that one sit. Judy laughed, a sound I didn't recognize. Dad worked on some big cases, though, she offered, but her voice carried no conviction. She was checking the box, including me out of obligation. I'm sure. Mitchell's eyes drifted over my shoulder, tracking a waiter. Though I suspect prosecution doesn't exactly translate to private sector compensation. He smiled, not unkind, worse, pitying. The next 40 minutes followed a pattern. I would begin a sentence. Judy would interrupt. Mitchell would redirect his achievements. The clients, the properties, the investment strategies only sophisticated people understood. When I mentioned a case involving securities fraud, he nodded with the patience of a kindergarten teacher listening to a child describe their drawing. That's fascinating, he said, which meant it wasn't. His phone buzzed twice during my stories. He checked it both times. When he spoke, Judy angled toward him, her body a closed parenthesis. I wasn't inside. The waiter brought the check in a leather folder. $280 for my half. 3 appetizers, 2 entrees, wine I hadn't ordered. I reached for my wallet, the leather soft and cracked from decades in my pocket. Let me cover my half. It's only fair. Mitchell's hand waved dismissively, already producing a platinum card that caught the light. No need, Mr. Collins. His smile widened, generous and condescending in equal measure. I understand that on a pension, 280 might be significant. My treat. The card hit the folder with a decisive snap. I looked at Judy, waited for her to say something. Anything. She was looking at Mitchell, her expression warm with approval. That's so generous of you, honey. She didn't glance my way, didn't acknowledge what he'd implied, that I couldn't afford dinner, that I was financially fragile, that his money made him better. The insult hung in the air like cigarette smoke, visible to everyone, ignored by her. Well, I folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate. Thank you for dinner. Any time. Mitchell signed the receipt with a flourish. We should do this again. Maybe somewhere more. Casual next time. I know these upscale places can feel uncomfortable. Judy smiled, still didn't look at me. They left together, Mitchell's hand on the small of her back, Judy laughing at something he murmured. She didn't turn around. I walked to my car alone, my 10-year-old sedan parked between a Mercedes and a BMW. The drive home took 20 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. My hands were steady on the wheel, my breathing even, but my mind was working, processing patterns the way it had for 30 years in courtrooms. Mitchell wasn't just arrogant, he was strategic. Every comment calculated, every gesture deliberate. He'd positioned himself above me from the moment I walked in, and Judy had helped him do it. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the darkness, engine ticking as it cooled. One thought surfaced, clear and cold. I know exactly what Mitchell is. The question was, does Judy? The week that followed the dinner moved like cold molasses. I went through routines, morning coffee on the porch, afternoon walk through the neighborhood, evening news in my recliner, but my mind kept circling back to Mitchell's smile when he waved away my money. That patronizing smile. When Judy called on Tuesday saying she needed to talk, I told myself I was overthinking. Young couple nervous about family dynamics. Normal. She arrived Wednesday morning at 10, her car pulling into the driveway with a quickness that suggested urgency. I met her at the door. "Dad!" Her smile was enormous, genuine. "Mitchell proposed." The happiness hit me before thought could temper it. My arms opened automatically. "Judy, that's wonderful. Come here." She stepped into the hug, and for 5 seconds we were just father and daughter celebrating good news. Then she pulled back, and I saw the tension in her shoulders. "Let's sit down," she said. "There's a lot to talk about." We moved to the living room. She perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped. I took my usual chair, still smiling. "So when's the wedding? Have you set a date?" "August 15th. I know it's fast, but Mitchell's parents wanted summer, and the venue had an opening." "Which venue?" "Charleston Harbor Club." She said it quickly, watching my face. "Mitchell's parents are covering everything, so you don't need to worry about costs." Something in my chest tightened. I wasn't worried about costs. I'm your father. "I know, Dad. I just mean—" She looked at her hands. "It's going to be really nice. Elegant. Black tie. I can rent a tuxedo, Judy." "Of course, that's not—" She stopped, recalibrated. "Mitchell's family has certain expectations. Traditional. His parents, Willard and Helen, they're very involved in Charleston society. The guest list is specific?" I waited. In interrogations, silence makes people reveal more than questions do. "It's intimate," she continued. "Very small. About 80 people. So some of your friends, Marcus, the Johnsons, people from the prosecutor's office. The venue has capacity limits." "Which friends aren't invited, Judy?" "It's not personal. Mitchell's family has so many relatives and business associates, and the venue restrictions." "You're saying my friends can't come to your wedding?" Her jaw tightened. "I'm saying it's a small wedding. Mitchell's parents are paying $45,000. They get input on the guest list." I stood needing distance and walked to the kitchen. My hands found a glass, filled it with water I didn't want. Behind me, Judy's voice followed. "Also," Mitchell suggested, and I agree that we keep the aesthetic cohesive. You know, so photographs look unified. Maybe something understated in what you wear, so you don't stand out. The glass felt heavy in my hand. "You want me to dress modestly at my daughter's wedding so I don't embarrass you?" "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." I turned. She was standing now, defensive, arms crossed. This wasn't my Judy. Or maybe it was, and I'd been refusing to see it. "Mitchell's world is different from yours, Dad. That's just reality. I'm trying to navigate between both, and it would help if you understood that." "I understand perfectly." She left 10 minutes later, the conversation dying in uncomfortable silence. I watched her car disappear down the street and felt something shift in my chest. Not heartbreak, that was too simple. Recognition, maybe, of patterns I'd ignored because she was my daughter. The next day I drove to the bank, then the grocery store, filling afternoon hours with mundane tasks. When I pulled back into my driveway at 3, I heard her voice before I saw her car. The living room window was open. Judy's laugh carried through it, bright and unburdened. I know," she sounded delighted. "Dad's blazers are from the 90s. I swear one still has shoulder pads. I'll handle it diplomatically. Keep him from the receiving line where people take photos." Silence. She was listening to whoever was on the phone. Mitchell, obviously. He won't be at the head table anyway. Your parents, my bridal party. That's plenty. We'll put Dad with some of your parents' distant cousins. He'll be fine. More laughter. Easy. Conspiratorial. You're right. It's better this way. He wouldn't be comfortable around the Harbor Club crowd anyway. We're doing him a favor, really? I stood in my driveway, keys in hand, and listened to my daughter mock me to her fiancé. She left 20 minutes later. I waited until her car turned the corner before I entered my own house. That evening I sat at the dining room table and stared at the wall. The hurt was still there. I'm not inhuman. But underneath it, something else was crystallizing. Something cold and familiar. I walked to my bedroom closet and pulled out a cardboard box from the top shelf. Inside, case files, legal pads, notes from trials that had defined my career, evidence logs, witness statements, strategy documents. I carried the box to the dining room and spread the contents across the table. 30 years of building cases. 30 years of finding weaknesses in seemingly perfect defenses. 30 years of strategic thinking. I pulled a fresh legal pad from the drawer and clicked my pen. At the top of the page, I wrote 3 words: Mitchell, Willard, Helen. Below that, a single question. What are they hiding? Every defendant has vulnerabilities. Every case has a weakness. I had 2 months before the wedding. Time to build my case. The next morning, I woke before dawn, not from restlessness, but purpose. The case files from the previous night still covered my dining table. I made coffee and began creating a systematic investigation plan, the way I'd done hundreds of times before. By 9 o'clock, I was walking into the Charleston County Records office. The clerk, a young woman with efficient movements, smiled when I approached. "Can I help you find something?" "I'm researching investment firms for a friend." The lie came easily. "Could you show me how to search business registrations?" She guided me to a computer terminal. 20 minutes later, I had what I needed. Harrington and Associates, Incorporated, 1987. Principal officers Willard J. Harrington and Helen M. Harrington. Their business address matched the Harbor Club district. Naturally. I photographed the screen with my phone, then moved to the civil court archives. 2 client complaints, both settled pre-trial. The settlements weren't small. $85,000 and $120,000. Companies don't pay that kind of money unless they're hiding something worse. I also found Mitchell's personal tax dispute from 3 years back. Small potatoes, $4,200 in contested deductions. But the pattern interested me. Aggressive claiming, minimal documentation, settled only after IRS pressure. Back home, I organized the findings into folders. Then I called Marcus Webb, my former colleague from the DA's office. "Sylvester?" His voice carried genuine warmth. "This is a surprise. How's retirement treating you?" "Can't complain. Listen, my daughter's marrying into the Harrington family. You know them?" A pause. "Investment people." "That's right. I know they sail close to the wind." His tone shifted, became careful. "Very aggressive tax strategies. Nothing prosecutable, but they've had IRS audits. Multiple. They always settle before it goes anywhere." "Settle how?" "Pay the fine, promise to restructure, then find new loopholes. It's a pattern." I thanked him and hung up, adding notes to my files. 3 days later, I sat across from Robert Chen in his downtown office. The attorney's eyes moved over the documents I'd spread across his conference table. "Mr. Collins, you're paying for my expertise, so I'll be blunt." He tapped one of the pages. "These deductions they're claiming? Legal but aggressive. 1 thorough audit, and they'd face serious penalties." "How serious?" 40 to 60,000 in fines, possibly more. The IRS doesn't appreciate creative interpretation." I leaned forward. "What would trigger an audit?" Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "Anonymous tips with specific documentation, pattern evidence, or just bad luck, random selection." The consultation cost $1,400. I paid in cash. That evening, Judy called to cancel our scheduled dinner. "Dad, I'm overwhelmed with preparations. Can we reschedule?" Her voice carried stress, but also distance. We hadn't spoken face to face since the engagement announcement. "Of course, sweetheart. I understand." I kept my tone pleasant. "I'm sending over a gift. Just something I thought you'd like." "You don't have to." "I want to." 4 days later, she canceled again, this time via text. "So sorry. Dress fitting running late." "Rain check?" I responded. "No problem. Enjoy the fitting." Then I drove to Worthington and Sons Fine Silver. The store occupied a restored building on King Street, the kind of place where they served champagne while you browsed. A sales associate approached immediately. I'm looking for a wedding gift, I said. Something significant. Silver service, perhaps? She showed me 3 sets. I chose the most expensive. 12 place settings, hand-engraved, sterling. $2,800. Gift wrapping? Please, include a card. I wrote 4 words on the card. For your new home. Love, Dad. The next morning, I drove to Judy's apartment downtown. She wasn't home. I left the package with the concierge, a young man who raised his eyebrows at the size of the box. Make sure she gets it today, I said, handing him $20. 2 days later, my phone rang. Judy's voice was confused. Dad, the silver service. It's beautiful, but it's so expensive. You didn't need to. I wanted you to have something nice, something that lasts. Mitchell was surprised. He said, well, he thought it was generous. I smiled at the wall. I'm glad you both like it. After we hung up, I imagined their conversation. Mitchell recalculating his assumptions about me, wondering if I had money they didn't know about. Good. Let them wonder. 2 days later, the invitation arrived. Cream cardstock, embossed lettering. Mr. and Mrs. Willard Harrington request your presence at a rehearsal dinner in honor of Mitchell Harrington and Judy Collins. Their estate address was in the most exclusive part of Charleston. I studied the names. Willard, Helen. Now I had faces to attach to the business records. I called the number on the invitation to confirm attendance. A woman answered, Helen, I presumed, her voice carrying that particular Charleston society accent, honey over steel. Mr. Collins, we're so pleased you can join us. Of course I'll be there, I told her. I'm looking forward to meeting you both. I was. I dressed carefully for the rehearsal dinner. Not my best clothes, but not my worst either. Let them see what they expected. For now. The Harrington estate sat 40 minutes north, in a gated community where property values started at $2 million. My decade-old sedan looked exactly as out of place as I felt when I pulled up to the security booth. The guard checked my name against a list, then waved me through. The driveway curved through manicured grounds for a quarter mile before the mansion came into view. Colonial-style, white columns, 3 stories. Landscape lighting made it glow against the evening sky. I parked beside a Range Rover and a Mercedes, then walked to the front door. Mitchell answered, Mr. Collins, right on time. He led me through a foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than my car. Voices carried from the back of the house. Mom, Dad, Judy's father is here. They emerged from what looked like a study. Willard, tall, silver-haired, golf course tan. Helen, elegant in silk, jewelry catching light. Sylvester! Helen's smile was professionally warm. Wonderful to finally meet you. Judy speaks so highly of you. Please come in. Don't mind the construction noise. We're adding a wine cellar. $80,000, I'd later learn. She mentioned it 3 times. Dinner was served in a formal dining room. Original paintings on the walls. China so delicate I worried about breaking it. Willard positioned himself at the head of the table, natural command post. So, Sylvester. He poured wine I didn't recognize. Judy tells us you were a prosecutor. 30 years? That's right. State service. He nodded approvingly. Noble work, truly. But let's be honest, not the most lucrative path. Am I right? I kept my voice mild. I did well enough. Retirement's comfortable. Helen touched Willard's arm, that united front gesture I'd seen in hundreds of couples over decades. Of course you did, and you raised Judy beautifully despite, well, circumstances. Single parent, modest means, that takes real character. She made poverty sound like a disability. Judy sat across from me between Mitchell and Helen, her posture defensive. She didn't meet my eyes. The meal continued. Helen recounted their recent trip to Tuscany. Willard discussed market returns with technical precision. Mitchell added stories about client acquisitions, his gestures mirroring his father's, the same hand movements, the same conversational dominance. When I mentioned a securities fraud case I'd prosecuted, Willard listened with polite boredom. Fascinating. Must be so different from the private sector. Helen changed the subject to the honeymoon. 3 weeks in Santorini. We're gifting them the villa rental. Mitchell smiled at Judy. She's never been to Greece. That'll change now. The implication hung there. I'd never provided travel. Never given her those experiences. After dinner, we moved to the veranda. The view stretched over perfectly maintained grounds, lit gardens, a pool that gleamed like blue glass. "Beautiful property," I said. "We've put a lot into it." Willard sipped bourbon. "Worth it, though. Family legacy matters." Helen appeared beside us, touching my arm with practiced concern. "Sylvester, I wanted to mention your suit for the wedding. Do you have something appropriate? I'll be fine." Of course, of course." Her smile didn't change. "But if you need, our tailor has a lovely discount section. Very dignified options. Budget-friendly." She said it in front of Judy, who was standing 10 feet away, arranging flowers with Mitchell. I watched my daughter's face. She heard. Her cheeks colored. She looked at the floor, fidgeted with a lily. She said nothing. Mitchell glanced over, smirked, then returned to his conversation. "That's thoughtful of you," I told Helen. "I'll keep it in mind." I left at 10, thanking them for their hospitality. Mitchell walked me to my car. "Glad you could make it, Mr. Collins. We'll see you at the wedding." "Wouldn't miss it." I drove back toward Charleston, but stopped downtown at Blackwell & Sons Custom Tailoring. The shop stayed open late for clients who could afford custom work. "I need a suit," I told the tailor. "Something excellent, not flashy, just quality." He measured me, showed me fabrics. I selected charcoal wool, subtle but unmistakable craftsmanship. $890, he said. "Ready in 4 days." "Perfect." At home, I spread my investigation materials across the dining table one final time. Everything I'd learned, everything I'd observed. Chen's analysis, the business vulnerabilities, the family patterns, tonight's casual cruelties. I pulled out fresh legal pads and began writing. By 2 in the morning, I'd filled 12 pages. Every step mapped, every contingency planned, every vulnerability identified. At the top of the first page, I'd written a single question. What's the appropriate penalty for contempt? Below it, I'd answered myself. Public humiliation followed by systematic dismantling. The wedding was in 7 days. I had work to do. The morning of Judy's wedding, I dressed in the suit I'd ordered the week before. It fit perfectly. Nothing flashy, but unmistakably quality. In the mirror, I looked exactly like what I was. A man who understood the difference between modesty and poverty. Charleston Harbor Club sat on the waterfront. All white columns and manicured lawns. I arrived precisely on time. The valet's eyes lingered on my decade-old sedan, then slid away. I handed him the keys without comment. Inside, the receiving line stretched through the entrance hall. Helen saw me first, her smile brightening with practiced warmth. "Sylvester, don't you look nice?" She air-kissed both cheeks, already positioning me away from the photographer. "We're so glad you're here." Willard shook my hand firmly. "Good to see you. Exciting day." The ceremony took place on the terrace overlooking the harbor. 80 white chairs, rose petals scattered on marble, an orchestra playing something classical I didn't recognize. I sat in the back row. Judy looked beautiful walking down the aisle. For those 30 seconds, I forgot everything else and just watched my daughter. The reception began at 6. A coordinator directed me to table 18, near the service entrance beside a column, far from the head table's raised platform. My table mates were distant Harrington cousins, who introduced themselves politely, then ignored me. I watched the room instead. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the harbor, $8,000 in flowers, easily. The orchestra transitioned to dance music. Mitchell worked the crowd, champagne glass perpetually refilled. He moved from table to table, with groomsmen trailing behind, laughter echoing across the ballroom. Around 7, I heard him before I saw him. "You see that guy over by the columns?" His voice carried, alcohol amplified. "That's my father-in-law. Looks like we should have given him directions to the homeless shelter, right?" The groomsmen cluster erupted in laughter. People at nearby tables turned. One groomsman said something I couldn't hear. Mitchell responded louder. "What? I'm just saying. Look at that suit." More laughter. Helen's table was 15 feet away. She heard. I watched her lean toward her companions, voice carefully modulated to carry. "Well, the suit is certainly economical. We offered to help, but..." She shrugged, letting the implication hang. The laughter spread, not raucous, but knowing. Social warfare disguised as observation. I looked for Judy. She stood near the cake table with a bridesmaid, her back to Mitchell's performance, but her shoulders were tight. She'd heard. She turned slightly, saw me watching, then turned further away and engaged intensely with her friend. She made a choice, right there, in that moment. I stood. Conversations paused. Heads turned. They expected me to leave quietly, I suppose. Dignified retreat. Instead, I walked across the dance floor. My steps were measured, unhurried. The crowd parted slightly. I could feel every eye tracking me. The bandleader stood near the microphone, organizing sheet music. I approached him directly. "May I borrow that for a moment?" He hesitated, then handed it over. I faced the room. 150 people. Conversations dying in waves as they realized something was happening. "I want to congratulate the newlyweds." My voice carried clearly. 30 years of courtroom projection. "And thank the Harrington family for this beautiful event." Mitchell's face had frozen mid-smile. Willard leaned forward slightly. "You know, 30 years as a prosecutor taught me to recognize people's true value." I paused, found Mitchell's eyes, not by their clothing or their bank accounts, but by their decency, by how they treat people who can't benefit them. The silence was complete. "Judy," I looked at my daughter, "I've always wanted the very best for you. I hope you found exactly that." I crossed to the head table. Judy stood stiffly as I approached. I wrapped my arms around her. She didn't return the embrace, just stood there, rigid, her hands at her sides. I released her, nodded once to Mitchell, acknowledgement, not friendliness, and walked back across the dance floor. The crowd remained silent. I could hear my own footsteps. The doors closed behind me with a soft click. I retrieved my car from the valet. He'd parked it in the back lot, naturally, away from the Teslas and Mercedes. I didn't drive home. Instead, I headed downtown to the 24-hour FedEx office on King Street. The manila envelopes were already prepared, sealed, addressed. I'd filled them out 3 days ago. Internal Revenue Service, Charleston Division, Charleston Better Business Bureau, both with detailed documentation inside. I dropped them in the overnight slot. By Monday morning, they'd reached their destinations. The wedding had been Mitchell's game. This was mine. I woke Sunday morning clearer than I'd felt in weeks. While Mitchell and Judy were boarding their flight to Greece, I made coffee and opened my laptop. The IRS complaint form appeared on screen. I'd drafted it 3 days earlier, but now it was time to finalize and submit. I spread Robert Chen's notes across the table. 3 years of Harrington and Associates tax returns, public information for registered investment firms. Chen had highlighted the vulnerabilities. Now I documented them. Schedule C business expenses, $47,000 in client entertainment, possible but aggressive. Home office deduction, 40% of a 6,000 square foot residence. Legal but questionable. Income classification shifting between personal and corporate to minimize tax burden. Pattern suggesting strategic manipulation. I wrote carefully. Not accusations, observations, questions for review. The language mattered. Too aggressive, and they'd dismiss it as vendetta. Too vague, and they'd ignore it. Respectfully submitted for examination. Potential misclassification of income under Section 162. Entertainment expenses exceeding reasonable business necessity under Section 274. Home office deduction inconsistent with primary business use. 8 pages. Specific line items. Tax code references. The kind of complaint that triggers mandatory review. I printed it, signed where required, made copies for my file. The Better Business Bureau complaint was simpler. I adopted the persona of a concerned former client. Vague enough to avoid defamation, specific enough to seem credible. Aggressive sales tactics, pressure to invest in high-risk portfolios, minimal disclosure of fee structures. 3 pages, anonymous. Unverifiable but requiring investigation. At 3 o'clock, I drove to the post office downtown. The clerk processed my certified mail. "You'll get tracking confirmation," she said. "Perfect. I want to ensure it's received." I dropped the BBB complaint in the regular mail slot. Then I went home and waited. For 3 days, I maintained completely normal routines. Monday, grocery shopping, afternoon walk. Tuesday, library, lunch at the diner on Broad Street. Wednesday, morning coffee on the porch, reading the novel I'd been meaning to finish. Bureaucracy moves at its own pace. I'd filed enough complaints as a prosecutor to know the rhythm. Thursday afternoon, I was deadheading roses in my garden when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Sylvester? Willard's voice, controlled but tight. I wanted to thank you again for attending the wedding. Your speech was memorable. I set down the pruning shears. I meant every word. Judy deserves the best. Of course. A pause. Unusual timing. We've just received notice of a tax audit. Quite thorough, apparently. 3 years of returns. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that? I kept my voice perfectly mild. Tax audits? That's unfortunate. But you run an honest business, don't you? I'm sure it's routine. Routine? His tone hardened. Right. If your books are clean, you have nothing to worry about. I picked up the shears again, examined a rose. Though I hear these things can take months, and the legal fees can be significant, but I'm sure you're prepared for that. Silence stretched between us. Wasn't that the point? I continued quietly. Being prepared? More silence. Then, I see. Do you? Because I want to be clear. I don't make threats, Willard. I taught myself long ago that threats are just noise. I prefer action. Measured, legal, thoroughly documented action. This is about Mitchell's behavior at the wedding. This is about a pattern of behavior. Your son's, your wife's, yours. I let that settle. You thought I was weak because I was quiet. That's a common mistake. What do you want? Want? I smiled at the roses. Nothing from you. I just want you to understand something. I spent 3 decades building cases against people who thought they were untouchable. Some of them had more money than you, better lawyers, political connections. They all thought they'd win. And I never lost a case I built carefully, Willard. Not once in 30 years. I heard him breathing, processing. The audit will find everything in order, he said finally. Will it? Then you've got nothing to worry about. Though even clean audits take time. 8 months, typically. And you'll need to hire specialists. Tax attorneys don't come cheap. Probably 60, 70,000 in legal fees before it's done. You're a vindictive man? No, I'm a thorough one. There's a difference. I paused. How's the honeymoon going? Greece is beautiful this time of year. He hung up. I sat in the garden long after the call ended. The roses needed more work, but I didn't move. He knew. He understood this was deliberate, which meant he'd retaliate. Men like Willard always did. I went inside and opened a new document on my computer. Title, Anticipated Counter Moves. If he came after me, I'd need to be ready, and I would be. Because unlike Mitchell's crude jokes or Helen's social warfare, I understood real combat. I'd spent 30 years in it. The audit notification reached Willard on Thursday. I knew because the phone calls started the following Monday. Jim Patterson called at 10 in the morning. We'd worked together for 15 years. He knew me better than most. Sylvester, I heard some troubling things. His voice carried that careful tone people use when they're worried about you. Folks saying you're, well, fixated on your daughter's new in-laws, making accusations. That doesn't sound like you. I set down my coffee. What kind of accusations, Jim? Tax fraud, unethical business practices. Look, if you're struggling with Judy's marriage, there are healthier ways to process. I'm not struggling, Jim. I'm fine. Are you? Because people are concerned. People. Plural. Coordinated. I appreciate the call, I said, but I'm okay. Really. Sandra Martinez called that afternoon. Less gentle, more direct. Sylvester, cut through the noise. Did you file an IRS complaint against Harrington and Associates? I exercised my rights as a citizen to report potential irregularities. That's not illegal, Sandra. It's civic duty. You're making yourself look obsessive, vindictive. Is that what you want? I want accountability. If that looks vindictive, so be it. She sighed. Just be careful. You're building a reputation you might regret. I hung up and drove to Common Grounds Cafe, downtown. Ordered coffee I didn't drink and mapped out what was happening. Mitchell was working his connections. Helen was weaponizing her social network. They were painting me as unstable, paranoid, obsessed. Character assassination disguised as concern. It was effective. I'd give them that. 2 days later, I was deadheading roses when my phone rang. Judy, I answered standing. Didn't sit down. This wouldn't be long. Dad? Her voice was tight. What are you doing? Working in the garden. You? Don't. Just, she exhaled sharply. Mitchell says you're spreading lies about his family. Why can't you just be happy for me? I'm happy for you, Judy. I'm not happy about being called homeless in front of 100 people. That was a joke? You're overreacting. Was it? Because everyone laughed, including his parents, and you said nothing. Silence. Then, Helen says you might need help, that your behavior is concerning. Helen says? I kept my voice level, but something cold was rising. Since when is Helen your source on my mental health? She's concerned. Everyone is. You filed some kind of complaint against Mitchell's family business. Dad, that's crazy. I filed a legitimate complaint about questionable tax practices. If they have nothing to hide. You're trying to ruin my marriage. No. I looked at the roses, their perfect red blooms. I'm defending my dignity. I haven't done anything illegal. I simply reported what I observed. If that threatens Mitchell's family, maybe ask yourself why. This has to stop. It will. When they understand you can't humiliate people without consequences. Then I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry you feel that way. Feel. As if facts were feelings. Judy, I love you, but I won't apologize for this. They tried to make me feel worthless. I'm showing them I'm not. By destroying my husband's family business. If it's destroyed by truth, it deserved to be. She hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at nothing. The line between us had been fraying for months. Now it was cut. She'd chosen. I walked inside, poured fresh coffee, and opened my laptop. That evening, I composed an email. Anonymous account, created at the library that morning. Subject line, information regarding local investment firm audit. The body was brief. Charleston-based Harrington & Associates, currently under IRS audit. Additional complaints filed with Better Business Bureau regarding aggressive sales tactics. Public information available through proper channels. I attached links to public records, business registration, complaints database, IRS public filing information, nothing confidential, all verifiable. The recipient, Sarah Chen, business reporter at Charleston Business Journal. I saved the draft. The next morning I drove to the library and sent it from their public computer. Untraceable. By noon, Sarah Chen called Harrington & Associates, requesting comment on reports of an ongoing IRS audit. I was having lunch at home when my phone rang. Caller ID, Harrington & Associates. I let it go to voicemail. Willard's voice tight with controlled fury. Mr. Collins, we need to discuss this situation. Call me. I deleted it. We'd discuss it on my terms, not his. The Charleston Business Journal ran the story on Monday. Headline, Local Investment Firm Under Federal Audit. No names, but Charleston's business community was small enough. I read it at breakfast. The reporter had done her job well. All facts verifiable, no speculation, just enough detail to raise questions. My coffee paused halfway to my mouth. I allowed myself a small smile. Then I continued my routine. Over the next 2 days, I monitored the fallout through public sources. LinkedIn showed Palmetto Property Group removing their connection to Harrington & Associates. Business filing databases showed contract termination notices. Coastal Holdings, Palmetto, $180,000 in annual revenue, gone. I documented everything in a spreadsheet. Thursday morning, I read that Harrington had hired Morrison & Blackwell, one of Charleston's most expensive tax law firms, $650 an hour. The preliminary audit report had found violations, aggressive depreciation on business vehicles, questionable home office deductions, entertainment expenses exceeding reasonable limits, projected penalties, $47,000, legal fees already, over $30,000. I sat back in my chair, absorbing the numbers. This wasn't satisfaction exactly, more like completion, pieces falling into place. Friday afternoon, I heard a car in my driveway. Through the window, Mitchell's Audi. I opened the door before he knocked. Mr. Collins, he tried for casual. Hope I'm not disturbing you. I was in the neighborhood and thought we should talk. About what, Mitchell? This misunderstanding between our families. I led him to the living room, but didn't offer a seat, didn't offer coffee or water. He stood awkward while I settled into my chair. Look, I know I made some jokes at the wedding. His smile was forced. Maybe I had too much champagne. I apologize. Can we move past this? You called me a homeless man, I said flatly. Your parents laughed. Judy said nothing. That wasn't champagne. That was who you are. His smile cracked. Fine. You're upset. I get it. But this IRS thing, the Business Journal article, that's too far. You're hurting Judy too. We're losing clients. My income. I filed a legitimate complaint about questionable tax practices. If the IRS found problems, that's between your firm and them. You know exactly what you're doing. His voice rose. This is revenge. You're trying to ruin us. Ruin you? I met his eyes without blinking. No, I'm holding you accountable. There's a difference. He paced to the window, back again. Young man energy with nowhere to go. What do you want? Money? An apology in front of people? What? I don't want anything from you, Mitchell. Then why? Because you thought I was an old fool you could humiliate without consequence. I leaned forward slightly. You were wrong. I practiced law for 30 years. I know how to use it. I haven't done anything illegal. I simply exercised my rights as a citizen. If your firm's books are clean, you'll be fine. If they're not, you'll pay the appropriate penalties. That's how systems work. You're destroying my family's business over a joke. I'm exposing problems that already existed. If a joke can destroy your business was already fragile. His hands clenched. For a second I thought he might try something physical. I'm 62, but I didn't move. Just watched him. He deflated instead. Please, he said quietly. Judy's caught in the middle of this. She's falling apart. Then she should have defended me when you mocked me. She didn't know what to say. She knew. She chose silence. He stared at me, understanding finally that there was no negotiation here. You're a vindictive man. I'm a thorough one, I corrected. You wanted to see what I was made of. Now you know. He left without another word. I sat there for several minutes after his car disappeared. Then I poured 2 fingers of bourbon, rare for me, and walked to the front porch. The afternoon heat was oppressive. I sat in the old wicker chair and stared at the street, glass warming in my hand. This should feel better, I thought. Victory should taste sweeter. Instead, it just tasted necessary. I finished the bourbon and went inside to document the encounter in my case file. Mitchell's desperation, his failed attempts at manipulation, the confirmation that the strategy was working. I was typing when my phone rang. Judy. I stared at her name on the screen. She'd called 5 times in the past week. I'd answered none of them. This time I picked up. Dad! Her voice was ragged. Please, you have to stop. Mitchell's family is falling apart. He's talking about, I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes, took a breath. Judy, I love you. But I can't stop. Not until they understand you can't humiliate people without consequences. But I'm the one suffering. This is my marriage. Then you should have defended me at the wedding. Silence. Then quietly, I can't fix this, can I? No, I said. You can't. She hung up. 3 more clients left by Wednesday. I tracked each departure through LinkedIn notifications and public contract databases. Seabrook Investments, Charleston Capital Partners, Heritage Financial, combined annual revenue, $250,000. The firm was bleeding out. Slowly, but steadily. Martha Patterson called Thursday afternoon, Jim's wife, member of Charleston Garden Society's board. Sylvester, thought you should know. Helen Harrington resigned from the charitable committee today. Patricia Worthington mentioned financial concerns. She paused. Just thought you'd want to hear it. I appreciate that, Martha. She didn't ask questions. Didn't need to. I made a note in my files. Helen's social position, carefully constructed over decades, was crumbling. For a woman who valued status above nearly everything, this would hurt more than the money. I allowed myself a brief smile. Friday evening, my phone rang. Judy. I stared at the screen through 5 rings. I'd avoided her calls all week. Part of me wanted to keep avoiding them. But I answered. Dad? Her voice was wrecked, raw from crying. Please, I don't understand what's happening. Mitchell's family is falling apart. The business, Helen's committee, everything. Mitchell says you did this. Please tell me he's wrong. I kept my voice steady. I filed legitimate complaints about questionable business practices. That's all. That's all? Her pitch rose. Their reputation is destroyed. Why? Because of a joke at the wedding? That's insane. Something in me snapped. A joke? I stood abruptly, pacing to the kitchen. He called me homeless, Judy, in front of 100 people. His parents laughed, and you... I stopped, breathing hard. You turned away. You pretended not to hear. I was embarrassed. I didn't know what to do. You knew exactly what to do, defend your father. But you chose them. You chose their money and their status over my dignity. So this is punishment? She was sobbing now. You're punishing me by destroying my husband's family? I'm not destroying anything. My voice filled the kitchen. I'm holding them accountable. If they're honest, they'll survive. If they're not, they'll pay the price. That's how the world works. You're being cruel. I'm being just. I gripped the counter. Judy, I love you, but I won't be anyone's punching bag. Not Mitchell's, not his parents, and not yours. If that makes me the villain in your story, I'll live with it. At least I'll live with my dignity intact. She hung up mid-breath. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to silence. The sun was setting. I should turn on lights. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and watched darkness gather. Had I gone too far? The question surfaced for the first time in months. Judy was suffering. My daughter. The person I'd raised alone, protected, loved above everything. I sat in the darkness for over an hour, not moving, just thinking. The house grew cold around me, or maybe I grew cold, hard to tell. Then I remembered Mitchell's smirk when the waiter brought the check, Helen's sweet poison about my economical suit, Willard's dismissive nod when I mentioned my career, the laughter spreading across tables. Judy's back, turned deliberately away. I stood, walked to the light switch, flipped it on. The kitchen flooded with harsh brightness. I returned to my office and pulled up the latest business filings. Harrington and Associates had laid off 2 more employees. Revenue projections showed another 15% decline. I documented it methodically. This wasn't cruelty. This was consequences. I was back at my computer when the email arrived. Subject: IRS audit conclusion, public record request. I'd filed a Freedom of Information request 2 weeks earlier. Standard procedure for public interest in federal investigations. The audit was concluding. Findings: $47,000 in penalties for improper deductions, $31,000 in back taxes owed. Additional recommendations for improved compliance, not criminal, not devastating, but permanent on their record. I saved the document, closed my laptop. It was done. The audit report arrived by certified mail on a Tuesday. Findings confirmed. $47,000 in penalties, $31,000 in back taxes, recommendations for improved compliance procedures. Harrington and Associates issued a brief public statement acknowledging resolution of routine audit matters. Routine. The word made me smile. 2 weeks later, I sat on my front porch with a book I wasn't really reading. The late August heat had finally broken. A breeze moved through the oak trees. I heard the car before I saw it. Judy's sedan pulling into my driveway. I closed the book but didn't stand, just waited. She got out slowly, hesitated at the bottom of the porch steps. I gestured to the empty chair beside me. No words needed. She climbed the steps and sat. We both stared at the street. 5 minutes passed, maybe 10. The audit finished. Her voice was small. They had to pay almost $80,000. 8 clients left. Mitchell's bonus is gone. His parents are talking about selling the beach house. I know, I said quietly. Public record. You're still tracking it? Until I was certain it was finished. Yes. More silence. A car passed. Someone walking a dog. I understand now. She looked at her hands. What you felt. When Mitchell said that, when everyone laughed, when I didn't... Her voice cracked. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I know you are. I turned to face her. But sorry doesn't change what happened. It just means you finally see it clearly. She nodded, tears starting. Mitchell says you destroyed them. No. I held them responsible. They destroyed themselves with their arrogance. The IRS found real violations, she said. Mitchell finally admitted that. Said his dad always pushed boundaries with deductions. Then they got caught. That's not revenge. That's accountability. She wiped her eyes. What about us? Is there an us anymore? I reached over and took her hand, held it firmly. I'm still your father. That doesn't change. But I won't pretend that wedding didn't happen. I won't forget that you chose their comfort over my dignity. I know, she squeezed back. I have to live with that. If you truly understand what happened, not just that I'm hurt, but why I acted, then yes, we can start over. But it won't be the same. You're part of their family now. I accept that. But I'm not your punching bag, and I'm not their joke. Those boundaries don't move. I understand. We sat together as the sun dropped lower. Orange light filtered through the trees. Neither of us spoke for a long time. How's the marriage? I finally asked. Strained. Mitchell's angry. At you, at his father, at me for coming here. But he's also scared. His whole world was based on his family's reputation and money. Now both are damaged. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe he'll learn what actually matters. Maybe. She didn't sound convinced. The sky turned purple. Streetlights flickered on. I should go. She stood. Mitchell will wonder where I am. Will you tell him you were here? She hesitated. Yes, I will. I nodded. Small honesty, but a start. She kissed my forehead, something she hadn't done since childhood. Can I come back? Next week? I'd like that. I watched her car disappear down the street. The porch light came on automatically, sensor triggered by gathering darkness. I didn't feel victorious. Victory suggested a game, and this had never been one. I'd simply refused to be humiliated without consequence, defended my dignity, perhaps taught my daughter something about strength, the real kind, that doesn't come from money or status, but from knowing your worth and refusing to surrender it. The evening was quiet. I sat a while longer, breathing the cooling air. Inside, the phone rang. I let it ring. Whatever it was could wait. For now, this piece was enough. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.